Hello, we're here with Karen La Borde, Green Party candidate for Camborne, Hale and Redruth. Morning, Karen.
Good morning.
So what's your key policy?
God, where do we start with the Green Party? I think it's not a key policy, it's a key principle. That we're aware that climate change is upon us and we have to do something radical. So business as usual is no longer acceptable. So the principles behind all our policies are to follow this track, that we've got to change and change fast in the UK.
And would you say climate change is why you're running?
Me personally?
Yes.
Of course it is. No, you might get me quite tearful here, but I joined the Green Party in 2014 because I moved to a beach. And I was forever picking plastic up. And then you become involved with the plastic and you realise that there's a problem with plastic. And then you start reading about why we have problems with plastic and you start reading more. And then you get on to people like George Monbiot and Naomi Klein. And before you know it, you suddenly realise, hey, we've got a crisis. And it's when you realise that the crisis is going to affect your children and your grandchildren. And probably now, within my lifetime, I can't sit back anymore. And last year I'm no spring chicken, as you're probably aware, but last year I became a climate activist. And I went and sat on a bridge in Southwark and waved my Extinction Rebellion flag, and I marched, and I'm going to keep marching. I was arrested in Whitehall this October, and I'm not going to stop now until I make a difference, because it's that important.
Well, it's the environment and climate change that I want to start with, actually.
Oh, good.
Being a Green Party candidate would make sense. So the Greens obviously offer the Green New Deal, which has been imported from America slightly, from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Can I just stop you there?
You can.
That's not true.
The title I meant, or?
No, that's not true. I think they actually pinched ours. In 2008, this was the dream of Carolyn Lucas, who put together a load of people, financiers, economists, to discuss the way forward. And they came up with the Green New Deal in 2008. And she has been promoting that ever since, and recently was involved with Clive Lewis of the Labour Party to promote the Green New Deal. And of course, it has now become Labour Party policy. They like to make it, this is a bit different, and they call it the Green Industrial Revolution. But it's the way forward. It is the way forward.
Okay, well that's actually what I wanted to ask you about. So Labour are also offering a version of the Green New Deal with slightly different zero emissions targets and so on. So why not vote for Labour rather than the Greens? Because aren't they more likely to get elected and make a difference?
No, that is true. They are electorally more successful than we are. We struggle because we tend to beaver away at things like the Green New Deal. And look at policy rather than getting elected.
So is a vote for the Greens not a vote to elect you? It's a wasted vote?
No, it's not a wasted vote, because now is the time that you have to vote Green. Because I get asked all the time, why don't Greens stand aside? And we have done, and it's brought us no rewards. I stood down as the St Ives candidate in the 2017 election to give the Lib Dem a run at the Conservative candidate. But it didn't work, it failed. So I now realise that standing down, stepping aside is wrong. We need to build the Green vote. Nobody asks the Brexit Party to stand aside, and they've built their voter base, and we have to build ours.
Well, many people asked the Brexit Party to stand aside, and they did. But
in this last election.
Well, now, with the Green Party, you say now is exactly the time to vote Green.
It is.
But you've already accepted you're probably not going to win, so surely it's vote Green, get Tory again.
Not necessarily. Nobody knows where the vote's going to go. There are so many factors in this election. It is not only a climate election for some parties, it's the Brexit election. So the Conservative vote is being split, the Lib Dem vote is being split, we have the Labour vote being split. The only vote that remains consistent is our own.
Well, I want to talk about a bit of the detail of the Green New Deal. It promises 100 billion of investment in green industry to fund it. including tax breaks for businesses to encourage them to become
Small
more green.
businesses.
For small businesses,
Small
to
and
encourage
medium,
them
yeah.
to become more green. Where are you going to get 100 billion from? That's almost the entire annual budget of the NHS.
£100 billion is about 7% of GDP. And that is an acceptable loan that we can take out for future generations.
So you're going to borrow it?
We have to. And like everybody borrows. When you get a mortgage, when you buy your first house, for instance, you will borrow so that you have something for the future. We have to borrow at the moment to make good the environment for our children and grandchildren.
But personal borrowing is very, very different to national borrowing. And we've seen before the damage that borrowing can have on our economy, and we've only just rebalanced our debt and deficit.
But that's if you believe in the Conservative spiel, yes. I mean, they go about the economy is only good in their hands, but actually the economy may have been, but the planet sure as hell hasn't. So we've got to look at this differently. That economy on the system that we're currently in does not work for the planet. And the lack of investment that we've had in our industry is absolutely appalling. And I'll give you why this system doesn't work and why we have to invest in it. Because in my constituency, we have the geothermal project at United Downs. Now they've drilled lovely holes now and they're going to be producing electricity very shortly. They couldn't get funding from business for that. They went round cap in hand everywhere. But businesses want quick profit. They don't want to invest in projects that may produce something in the long term, so they're not viable. So United Downs, the geothermal project, didn't get any finance from business, and they had to go and seek finance from the European Union and Cornwall Council. And from that, they have developed a super project and will very soon be producing a new form of electricity in Cornwall. And that's the problem, because new industries are stifled by the need for quick profit by businesses and investors. You've got to break through that. We need £100 billion spending very, very quickly. And I mean that, really quickly. And we have to loan from future generations to protect them.
Well, I'd like to move on now from the economy. You've mentioned the Brexit election and that it's the Brexit election for some. So the Greens have obviously campaigned for a people's vote. You haven't gone quite so far as the Lib Dems as to campaign for a revocation, but you're campaigning for a people's vote.
Yeah.
So if there is a people's vote and the vote to leave comes back again, will the Greens accept that?
If it goes to the people's vote?
If it goes to a people's vote and the people vote again to leave, will you accept that, the Greens?
One has to do, because that's exactly the point of that second referendum. We will be in touch with more of the facts. We'll have more information at that second referendum. We will probably know what the deal is going to be, and we can make that vote.
Well,
and if at that point it is leave, then you have to respect it.
Would you, as a Green MP then, if elected, vote for a Brexit deal?
No, I wouldn't vote for the Brexit deal.
So
no.
you'd accept the Leave result, but you wouldn't do anything in Parliament to enable it?
Oh no! If the Leave vote if the referendum was taken on the deal, then it wouldn't be down to Parliament to make that vote. Well, I suppose it could be still, if Eugenia Miller thing, it would still be.
You would have to vote it through.
But yes, I would.
You would vote for it?
After a second referendum.
Because your only sitting MP, Caroline Lucas, has said she wouldn't still vote for a Brexit deal, even if there was a second vote to leave.
Well, that's her personal choice. If I can be truly honest, I didn't vote in the last referendum because I sat on the fence. Because actually, as a Green, and there's a lot of Greens that think this way, you can see the benefit of moving to a Brexit. I mean, historically, from the Ecology Party, we've not always been pro-European. We see the problems with the Common Agricultural Policy. We see problems with free trade, because free trade means a lot of carbon emissions, lots of ships on the seas. So there is actually a point where I can see a green Brexit that actually benefits, you know, our country and reducing its carbon emissions. So you
could be a Eurosceptic then, in the right circumstances?
I don't think I'm a Eurosceptic now, because 3 years down the line, and I've seen the arguments for and against Brexit, I can see the huge benefits of staying in now. And a lot of that is to do with the environment for me, the environmental regulations that have stimulated us, for instance, our CO2 emissions. The only reason why we've moved from coal or transitioned from coal to oil and gas is because of the regulation about the emissions that were causing acid rain and the regulations brought in by Europe. So it's really important, I think, that we stay in an international body to make sure we make transformations in things like the Common Agricultural Policy.
Okay, well, Brexit is a very important issue regionally
Yes.
to Cornwall.
Yes.
And I think almost every constituency here voted to leave by some margin or another,
Apart from
Truro and Falmouth.
Yeah.
So a big part of that is the common fisheries policy. So if we were to stay in Europe and the Greens want to stay in and reform, what would you do about the common fisheries policy, which is causing significant damage to the Cornish economy and really not helping us?
Well, for me, I don't think it's the common fisheries policy that's the problem. The problem is the quota system, which they are working on it because a lot of fish were being ditched. But the specific problem in the UK is that the quota is being given to large corporations, and the smaller fishing vessels that operate out of Newlyn and out of other ports in Cornwall are being starved of quota. And that quota is going, I think, 25% of the UK quota goes to one company, which is actually owned by a Dutch company.
But they're not getting starved out by the fact that half of our waters can only be fished by French ships now.
No, that's not true. Half our waters can't just...
From the 6 Mile line, it's almost exclusively French. There's lots of French vessels out there. They get to fish in what used to be British waters.
Yes, they are. But even if you come out of the common fisheries policy, we have to negotiate internationally for quota. And we all quotas are governed or led by science, by scientists who tell us the balance, what we have, what stocks are available in the seas at the present time. And they tell these organisations how much they should be fishing. And then, surprisingly, the negotiations take place
But at
internationally.
least we'd be able to negotiate internationally our own quota terms. Whereas in the EU, the quotas are never going to be necessarily reduced in our favour because the French won't allow it.
Well, in terms of negotiation, going as part of a larger body and organising your quota or negotiating your quota, you're negotiating from a position of strength. Going as a single country, I think you will weaken our position in any international negotiations. And I actually think that a lot of what could be done for our fishermen is what the UK government could do and has failed to do.
Okay, well, I'd like to move on to a related local issue. A very interesting policy for Cornwall, which the Greens have in their manifesto, is a referendum on the Cornish Assembly as part of devolution. So first of all, could you give us any idea when that would be if the Greens got into government?
The Cornish Assembly just doesn't stand on its own. The whole principle of moving to a new system is to relocalise economies. That's one of the principles.
But when would
behind
the
this.
referendum be?
Well, how can I say? I mean, we don't know.
You don't
but
know.
the idea would be to devolve power to local assemblies across.
Okay, well, that's all
UK.
in the manifesto, but
Yeah.
also on that referendum, do you think there would be any rules imposed? So a 60% majority needed, for example?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
As should have been in the last referendum. But yes, the idea is just to give power back to communities. I mean, here in Cornwall, we're experiencing lack of control at the minute. We have housing targets set by central government. We have a lot of green areas being built on because of the demands of central government.
Okay, well,
we need that control.
We need to move on now. So I want to move on to healthcare. The Lib Dems are promising 7 billion. The Labour Party are promising even more for healthcare. How much are the Greens promising?
You see, this is what you get when you go to hustings. I find it quite difficult to deal with. It's always like there's this big ask, and the NHS has got a big ask because it's been deprived of investment for a long time. And it's what can you do for us? What are you going to do for us? But the climate change is such a big issue that people should be asking, how can we change? What do you need us to do?
Okay, well, that wasn't the question. Do you have a figure for how much the Greens are going to invest in the NHS?
No.
Even an estimate?
No. I don't think we have a specific figure.
But you'll invest 100 billion in renewable energy. So you'll install solar panels on the top of hospitals, but you won't invest in the medical care within them.
Of course, we are promising to invest far more in the National Health Service.
But you don't know how
It's
much.
not just purely money that's involved in the NHS. There are really serious issues like creeping privatisation, which means that some of what's been given to the NHS is going away in profits.
Well,
to
if
private
you're going to
companies.
invest more, and you still can't tell us how much you're going to invest, if you're going to invest more, won't you have to borrow on top of your 100 billion to afford that?
Because Aside the as part of the Green New Deal, we're instituting a carbon tax, which will raise £76 billion a year, which we will then use to actually restructure the tax system. So we're going to scrap income tax and national insurance, and we will be creating a universal basic income, which everybody will get £89 a week, and we'll get rid of all those awful benefits and awful...
So you're going to scrap one of the biggest sources of revenue and then introduce a massive cost, as well as investing in the NHS and 100
We're not
billion.
going to scrap income tax. We're going to scrap the levels at which income
Right.
tax starts, at national insurance as well. And then we're going to institute a universal basic income. There will still be tax revenue, obviously. And we are also talking of a land value tax to get rid of council taxes as well.
So
and
who,
business
who would the
rates.
carbon tax hit?
The carbon tax would hit domestic producers of carbon, which is fossil fuels, as well as imported fossil fuels.
But it wouldn't hit normal people for their heating bills or anything like that. They
There
wouldn't be taxed.
There will be, obviously, the producers, the fossil fuel producers, will pass on their costs, and there will be rises.
So
But
a green government means a rise in fuel prices.
Yes, it will. But that's why we have the basic income to enable people to navigate through this transition that we have to make to a zero carbon economy. You have to make it.
Right, and one final question now on the Remain alliance, which has been a big issue of this campaign. Why are the Lib Dems and Greens both standing in both Truro and Falmouth and Camborne, Hale and Redruth?
Well, you have to ask the national negotiation teams. We will not involve down here. The Lib Dems sat with the Green Party in Westminster to organise this. And we had no...
So do you think it's going to harm your chances at all that there's a Lib Dem Remain candidate here who will split the Remain vote?
Yes, but as I've said before, the Remain vote and the Brexit is not my prime consideration. It is climate change. And you can vote for Remain with a Lib Dem and you won't get a candidate that's going to try for radical change. You get business as usual, which is going to harm the future for our children. And
Okay.
that's...
Well, I think we're out of time. Karen La Borde, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.